So I did not plan on this whatsoever. Tonight I was like, I don't have anything to say. And sitting back there, I'm like, I have a lot to say. So I'll start it up. This past year has been nothing that I can really explain in words. But I'll do my best. That's not the end of the story. But a year ago, Greg was getting ready for Super Summer Forms, and all my friends who had been were like, you really need to go. I was like, no, I don't. It's out of my comfort zone. They explained like walking up and hitting your bus and everything, like, no, I'm not going to do that. And so I thought, no, maybe next year. And then cheer camp was going to be the week of Super Summer. And so I was like, no, I can't do that. But then cheer camp got moved. And Craig was like, hey, can you go now? And I was like, I'm not going to go. And he's like, but you're free, right? And I was like, yeah, but I'm cool. And so at last minute, a couple weeks before, I was like, here you go, Craig. And he's like, oh, thanks. And then I went to Super Summer, and it completely turned my world upside down. I was not expecting for it to. And it just, every year, you go to your youth camp, and it really helps you go as a youth group, and you get to know the younger kids better, and the seniors, and everyone bonds and cries and tell life stories. But at Super Summer, it's just you and God. And that's really what I needed at that point in my life, was just not really a reminder, but just for me to know, Kelsey, God's right there. And because we all lose sight of that, because we get caught up in our own lives and we forget He's right there. And it really opened my eyes, and I had a lot on my heart. So I left there, and I was pumped. And then we had youth camp a couple weeks later. And I went to youth camp, and then middle of youth camp, I had to leave, and then I came back that night. And when I came back, I was running the sound booth, and I was in the back, and I was catching up with Craig and Tammy. And I just sat there, and I didn't work the computer, I just sat and listened to the lesson, which was exactly what I needed to hear that night. Because the youth camp before that, Curtis was a family group leader, and we talked about baptism. And I remember my family group, and all of them were raising their hands saying, oh, I was baptized on this day, and I changed my life around this day. And I was like, well, I've always been raised in the church. I don't really know a time when I was definitely like, God is the one. I just always grew up knowing God is the one. And so I just kind of sat there, and Curtis that year pulled me aside afterward, because he was like, you didn't say much, and you're always talking. And I was like, okay. And so I talked to him about it, and I explained that like I grew up as a Methodist, and then we started coming to the Baptist church, and then we changed to Baptist, and I was sprinkled as a baby, which just basically means that your parents are going to raise you in the right path, and they did. But I never made that stand of my own. I mean, I could say it, but I'd never been baptized enough to be like, this is my stand. And so I talked to Jimmy and Craig, and we had long conversations, and I was like, no, you're not going to talk me into this. I was like, I'm set in my stone, don't change it. But after Super Summer, that was on my heart, and it's like, I don't understand, God, why you're putting this on me, but I don't want it, so I'm just going to keep on walking. And then I go to youth camp, and I hear that lesson, and afterwards, before like the adults were just not standing up, I got Craig, and I said, Craig, I need to talk to you. I went out in the hall, and I started crying, and I told him, Craig, I want to be baptized right now. He was like, I want to go back, and that's what I want to do. And so I stood up in front of the church with saying I wanted to do that after camp with a few of my friends who wanted to rededicate their life. And then August 28th, I was baptized. Looking back on pictures, I was happy to save my life. You can see a smile, not just on my face, but in me. And I couldn't have been happier. And then a few days later, I got a concussion for 2 months. And during my concussion, I put on a good front, trying to heal, I couldn't come to church, I couldn't really do anything, talk to anyone, but I got upset with God, because I was like, why are you doing this to me? Because I had a friend during the time who had a concussion too, and theirs was over in 2 weeks, and I'm sitting here 8 weeks, going into 2 months, wanting me to go further and further to different doctors for different tests once a week. And I was like, I don't get it. And they had me on all these pills trying to fix it, and it wasn't working, and I was getting frustrated, and I was just like, I don't understand God, why you're doing this. I don't understand your plan. And so I kind of started gearing away from it. And then I started feeling alone. I went back to school, I started healing, going through progression. I'd be at a lunch table with my best friends, and I just wasn't feeling like I was even there. I just was blank. But no one would know it because I kept on a good front, because I don't like people to know anything's ever wrong. But then, my sophomore year, I have to say, it's probably the hardest year I've ever had in my life. Through ups and downs of every situation you can imagine. But now, because whenever I felt alone, and then, how long ago was it? A few months ago, too? Just looking at smiling. We started talking because a lot went on, and I became really close with Tammy. And we started me and Bailey went to what was it called? I don't know. It's like all the older people in church and us two in the back. And we started talking, and I started getting offensive, because I was like, hey, don't start talking about the younger youth like that. And then,
Transformational church. Transformational church.
And then then we were like, we're going to have a Bible study. And we started doing that for a few weeks on Thursday nights. And then I just kind of started feeling how I wanted to run to someone's arms, but I couldn't physically. And so I was like, I don't know what else to do. And then one night I was up there in sound booth, and then a song that they played on my concussion that really changed me then too was Face Down, and I started crying because I was really like, okay, I'm giving it up now. I can't do this on my own at all. And so I realized the one who I needed to run to is God, and his arms are always wide open and ready to hold me. And I just ran to him. I sat in his lap, I talked to him for hours at night, and it caught up with him, and every weekend I would text Tammy, and we'd talk about it, and she would check on me, and I realized that as much as I felt alone, it was because I was the one who strayed away, that God was still right there next to me, but I just didn't want to hear it, and I didn't want to hear his reasoning. And also kind of tying different stories that made me think of all this stuff to say that I'm going blank right now about. But Shelby said that how she prayed about that situation. And during all my hard stuff, I was still putting on the front in class and stuff, and I was able to talk about the hard time that I was having with a group of girls in my class that I had always ignored, because I was like, they're nothing like me, and I'm not going over there, so I'm going to stay with my friend, and I'm just going to act like they're going over there. And one day my friend wasn't there, so I was just sitting there and I'm like, I can't just be quiet this whole class. So I went over to them and I started talking, and that led me into a conversation about God and what he had done in my life. And lately she's not here.
She's not here.
But a really good friend that I've made, Deja, she decided to give her life to God because we started sharing stories, our family stories, and I was telling her everything that was going on this year in my life. And then they just started talking to me about how hard her life was, and she just broke down. And that girl was about to cry. You can say anything to her, and she's going to say right back, and she will not cry. And she started bawling, and I was like, whoa, why? I don't know what to do about this. So I got on my phone, I started texting Craig, and I was like, Craig, I'm talking to a girl about God. She started crying, what do I do? And so I started talking to her. And I was like, have you ever been to church? Do you pray? Have you talked to God before? And he's like, I've tried to go to church. He's like, but I don't usually do it. And I was like, well, I'm going to take you. So that Wednesday, I went up to her, and I was like, where do you live? So I got her phone number, and I called her, and she was like, yes. And I was like, hey, where do you live? I'm coming. She was like, what? And I was like, yeah, I'm in the car. She was like, okay. So I went and got her, and she came, and she was like, why am I here? And I was like, just listen, it's cool. And so as much as like, at the beginning of the year, I prayed, God, give me an opportunity. He gave me the opportunity the whole school year that I didn't take advantage of until late March. But with that opportunity that I was given that one day that my friend wasn't there, I was able to go up to them and talk to my friends and share the word of God with them. And it's just like you think, oh my gosh, I'm having such a bad time, but then you find all these other stories that you're like, I really don't have it bad whatsoever. And you really just start to realize how thankful and blessed you are for everything you've been given, and you just have to look at it in that way, because no one's perfect. We're not perfect, no matter how much we try to put on the front and try to fix it, but it's just, we all have good and bad in our life, but you have to find the good and bad. But there's something there. Even if it's funny to make you laugh, you gotta find the good in the situation. And that's what I've had to realize this year, and I'm back to that point in my life where I was on August 28th when I was baptized. That I don't have a bigger joy, don't have a bigger love than I do for God. So that's how you're wrapped up.